Following is a special hand-picked episode of Blue Sky specifically for our Rewind and Recharge Summer Series. Enjoy. From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to Blue Sky, where we share stories and insights to remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. I'm your host, Bill Burke. 25 years ago, today's Blue Sky guest had a good thing going. He was a successful executive at a world-leading household name company, and his job took him to fascinating places. But while on a getaway vacation, he had an experience that would radically change the course of his life and set him off in a very unexpected direction. As you'll learn in our conversation, it was John Wood's experience in Nepal that inspired him to quit Microsoft and create Room to Read, an organization designed to create meaningful change by educating disadvantaged children. He describes this work in his memoir, Leaving Microsoft to Change the World. And since Room to Read's inception, it has built nearly 50,000 libraries and brought the priceless gift of education to 26 million children in 20 countries. Building on Room to Read's success, John Wood created a second nonprofit called YouGo, an organization that aims to help ambitious and promising young girls in low-income countries pursue tertiary education by providing financial scholarships funded by individuals and corporations in high-income countries. John has won numerous awards and recognitions, including being named by Goldman Sachs as one of the world's 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs. He's been a 3-time speaker at the Clinton Global Initiative and is a 5-time winner of Fast Company magazine's Social Capitalist Award. In 2014, Queen Sylvia of Sweden awarded John with the World's Children's Prize, also called the Children's Nobel Prize. In recognition of his passion for opening libraries in the most underserved populations, the San Francisco Chronicle named John as the, quote, Andrew Carnegie of the developing world, unquote. I hope you find this Blue Sky conversation with John Wood as inspiring as I did. John Wood, welcome to the Blue Sky podcast.
Thanks, Bill.
I encourage everyone listening to read your book, Leaving Microsoft to Change the World. But for those who haven't yet, who will soon, I'd love for you to set the stage of this pivotal moment in your life when you were a successful executive at Microsoft. As I read it, you were climbing in the Himalayas and something clicked for you that really changed your life. Can you just sort of set the stage and tell us that story?
Yeah, definitely. So there was a rumor that if you went high enough in the Himalayas, you could escape the sound of Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer yelling at you. And so after 7 years at Microsoft, working grindingly long hours, I went off to Nepal to go do an 18-day trek. And I just pictured it being this ideal escape. I wanted to be in a place where I didn't have access to email, where nobody could get to me. And so the Himalayas were a really good place for that. On the second day of my trek, I met a headmaster of a local school in a little village called Bahundanda. And like many schools in the poorest parts of the world, it was simultaneously hopeful, but also rather sad. Hopeful because they had 400 children showing up, eager to learn, but sad because the school was in a poor village in a poor country. It lacked all the basics, including books. They didn't have any books in their library. And when the headmaster showed me the library and I saw these dusty, empty shelves in a dark room, I said, why don't you have books? You have so many students. They seem so eager to learn. And he said, well, in Nepal, we're too poor to afford education. But until we have education, we'll always remain poor. And that struck me as just the topic sentence of poverty, that it was poverty of opportunity. These kids had no chance. And then he made a request. He spoke a sentence that would forever change my life. It would cost me a lot of money. Eventually, he said, perhaps, sir, you will someday come back with books. And I'm a lifelong reader. I love to read. My 3-year-old boy, I love nothing more than reading with him. I love books. And I told the headmaster I'd help him. One of his teachers said, a lot of you truckers tell us you'll help us, and we never see any of you ever again. And so he threw down the gauntlet, and I said, I'm not that guy. You'll see me. And I went back a year later with 6 donkeys full of books. My father and I had collected over 3,000 books. We delivered them to several schools in that area. And seeing the looks on the face of kids who had never seen brightly colored children's books before was just life-changing for me. Kids were like stage diving onto the donkeys and grabbing at the books, and they were so excited. And so for me, it was a life-affirming moment. It reminded me of what my duty was on earth, that I'd made a lot of money at a young age. I didn't need the money. What I needed was meaning and purpose and focus. And so on that day in Nepal, I began the checkout process from my life at Microsoft and started to envision a different future.
Incredible. And so you were in your 30s, if I have it right. So
yeah, 34.
And you described, I think in the book, you said you wanted to be Carnegie with a yak, as Carnegie was a library builder. But you weren't Carnegie yet. You might, maybe if you'd stayed at Microsoft. So I know a lot of people, when they think about a life like yours, there's a debate, when do I do this? Do I do well and then do good? Do I, drop everything, or do I think even Bill Gates wrestled with this, should I give away my money early, or should I keep earning it so I have more to give away later? Did you think through that at all, or was it truly just sort of a calling and a meaning that just struck you and you had to do it?
I definitely thought through it, but I went back to Benjamin Franklin. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? I could sit there and say, well, gosh, if I work for 20 more years and I've got $1 gazillion, then I can go help these kids. Guess what? I wouldn't be able to help those kids, because now those 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds are 25 or 26 years old, and they've had no education, and they're one more generation to live in poverty. So the way I looked at it is I thought, I think anybody who's working for a living, this is a valid conversation. Yeah. I think for those who are really rich, it is often used as an excuse. It's like, well, all this work for 10 more, why is Larry Ellison not giving more of his money away? Like people, why is Jeff Bezos' ex-wife smoking him in terms of how much money she's deploying to meaningful causes? Yeah. But going back to me, I didn't have $1 gazillion. I wasn't going to start a foundation. I was going to start a cash-strapped NGO. But I told myself, here's the deal. Every time I raise $5,000, I can get one rural library set up. So I just have to get on an airplane and go to Zurich and to London and to New York and to Hong Kong and Singapore and all these money centers, do media interviews. We threw out the Andrew Carnegie example because Carnegie, late in his life, established about 2,500 libraries. And nobody had ever done for the developing world what Carnegie did for the US and the UK. So I said, let's be the Carnegie of the developing world. Let's open 2,500 libraries. Ultimately, Room to Read now is opened, I lose count, but it's over 35,000, I believe, libraries at this point. So we did 15x, 16x Carnegie. And that was starting from like a really small base. But I studied finance at Northwestern. I did my MBA at Kellogg. I understand compounding. Yeah. So it's just like, let's open 10 libraries this year, 20 next year, then 40, then 80, then 160, then 320. And if we can scale this like a business scales, then we'll eventually hit critical mass. And I think it was probably 2005. We're about 5 years in or 6 years in when Room to Read surpassed Carnegie. And then the challenge was, all right, it's easier to drive when you can chase taillights. Yeah. So we no longer had Carnegie's taillights to chase. So we decided to chase Howard Schultz's taillights. My colleague Jason Morris, who was an ex-Credit Suisse analyst who joined Room to Read, did an analysis, looked at Starbucks post-IPO. Once they had the capital, how many Starbucks did they open per year? Oof. We benchmarked ourselves against them. And Room to Read, years 3 through 12, we beat Starbucks. We were opening libraries faster than they had opened outlets, proving that the social sector could scale, not just as fast as the private sector, but actually in our case, faster.
So I'm glad you told that last story, because I'm trying to shoot down some of the things that keep people from doing what you did. And one of them is, well, I'm a hard charging person. I have an MBA, and business is where it's at, and for-profit's where it's at, and nonprofits are inefficient and slow. And you, it seems to me, turn that on its head. Is that fair? It seems like you brought a sort of traditional business discipline to this work that a lot of people assume just isn't in the nonprofit sector?
Very much so. I would say we did, not I did, because it was an amazing founding team. We brought along a lot of people. We say GSD, get shit done.
Yeah.
That when you wake up in the morning, the question is, what am I going to get done today? And am I going to talk about excuses and say what can't be done, or am I going to get out there and figure it out? Like I kind of laugh at the whole like effective altruism thing, because it's like that's not some new thing. Like 20x years ago, we looked at it and said, how can we deploy every single dollar? Let's keep our overhead low. Let's fly on frequent flyer miles donated by investment bankers. Let's get hotels to give us free room nights. Let's deliver books on the back of motorbikes, not in like air conditioned Land Rovers, and stretch the dollar really, really far. And we also said, let's let people know where their money's going. So Bill, if I was pitching you, I might say, hey, we can open a library in a country of your choice, let's say Cambodia or Vietnam. Maybe your 25th wedding anniversary is coming up. You could do this as a surprise gift for your wife, or maybe your mom's turning 70. I remember my friend Ben Happ, who worked at Credit Suisse. I saw him at Hong Kong Rugby Sevens a day after speaking at a Credit Suisse conference. And he said, you made my mother cry. I said, what? And he said, I saw you speak yesterday. My mother's a librarian. I called her this morning and told her we're opening a library in honor of her service to the American school system in Nepal.
Wow.
And she's going to get a chance to visit it. And she started crying. So we literally productized things to say, let's let the investor know where their money went. Let's hold ourselves accountable. And then when your grandmother is celebrating her 80th birthday, she's going to see a photo of the school that was built in her honor, or the library that was opened in her honor. And that's one of the reasons that I think Room to Read really caught on in the early years, is people said, wait, I can't afford to endow a building on the Stanford campus or at MIT, but gosh, I can afford to fund a Room to Read library. That would be and then companies really got into this. They're like client gifts. Imagine, your competitor sends your client a Chinese New Year gift that's like a fruit basket or a calendar.
Yeah.
And then you say, hey, thanks for your business. We've actually opened a school in honor of our partnership. It became a really big thing for us to be able to go pitch corporates to get some of the bigger money coming in.
Well, right. And not only are you showing them where the money's going, it's what I've heard described as a high leverage gift. Malcolm Gladwell has been very passionate about these, massive gifts that go to higher education in the United States. And, Stanford gets $100 million and it doesn't necessarily move the needle that much. You get $5,000 and you're opening a library. It seems to me your work is incredibly efficient use of philanthropy.
Yeah, and I know we'll get to this with Yugo, but I'll go off chronology for a minute here. What we're doing now with the Yugo initiative is a lot of these young women, not just at Room to Read, but at hundreds of other NGOs, young women at age 16, 17, 18 are hitting a premature glass ceiling. They want to go to university. They can't afford it. So it could be a young woman in Bangladesh or Pakistan or Vietnam or Cambodia or Nepal, where $800 US is enough for us to get that young woman. We raise money in strong currencies, deploy them in weaker currencies in countries where prices are lower. And for $800, a young woman can go to university for a year. $3,200 gets you through all 4 years of university. So that's my new scale play, is to figure out, can we looked at the Carnegie model, we looked at Starbucks, we had Room to Read libraries. Now my focus is, can I help 100,000 young women across the poorest countries of the world go to university and become doctors, nurses, teachers, economists, veterinarians, find careers that will help them take care of themselves, take care of their families, take care of their communities. And again, that's the thing where I feel like, wow, if literally you can say to somebody, $800 is enough to move the needle and get a young woman through university, it's not 80,000 at Columbia, it's 800 to go to a veterinary college in the Mekong Delta of Vietnam.
The story of John Wood's epiphany in Nepal is inspiring. Little did he know that a desire to get out of the range of Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer's voice would lead him to turn his entire life around, to go from life as a Microsoft executive to striving to become what he describes as Carnegie with a yak. What John quickly saw in so-called developing countries was most obviously material poverty, but he quickly saw an opportunity to address what he describes as poverty of opportunity. And once he set on this idea, he wasted no time. For fear of missing a generation of young people, he was determined to help. And once he jumped in, he kept his business person's hat on and worked to grow quickly by setting tough benchmarks, not against other nonprofits, but against aggressive corporations like Starbucks. And he used his sales and marketing skills to, as he says, productize giving opportunities. Turning back to our conversation, I wanted John to speak more about the importance of getting buy-in and involvement from members of the communities he set out to support. And it seems another discipline you've brought to your work is this belief that philanthropy shouldn't be dollars dropped from helicopters, I think is how you described it, and really getting people on the ground to have a stake in physically doing the work. You told a beautiful story somewhere. I watched you give a talk about not having enough shovels. And the first thing, shoot, we didn't have enough shovels. Well, you didn't have enough shovels because you had so many volunteers or people in the community who wanted to dig in. It seems to me that's a big part of your model and a reason for your success.
It's a really big part of our model. I had two co-founders, Aaron and Dinesh. Dinesh is Nepalese, and Dinesh used to say that he resented foreign aid groups who came into Nepal and said, step out of the way, local people. We're going to build a school for you. We're going to build you a bridge. He said, the Nepalese people are not afraid of hard work. Put us to work. Don't spend $10,000 buying airline tickets for people to come here from Switzerland. Like, give us the money to buy the shovels and to buy the cement. We take a similar approach now at YouGo, that all of our work being done in the university scholarship level is being done through local partners, where it's run by strong local people, mostly women, but it's Vietnamese women in Vietnam who are running Saigon Children's Charity and running the Relay Fund. And it's women in Pakistan running developments in literacy and women in Bangladesh running Jago. And those are the partners who we're working with on the ground because they know the local conditions. They've worked with these communities for years and years and years. And they can help us to figure out very quickly, where is this cohort of ambitious and promising young women who want to move on to university and are ready? And we can help them do that. So I think that for me, I never view myself really as the leader. I view myself as one of many, many, many leaders. And the most important leaders really are those who are on the ground every day, who are talking to those young women saying, what do you want to do with your life? And if you want to be a doctor, let us help you figure out how to get on that path.
Amazing. And another thing you've done in this work that strikes me as typical of great entrepreneurs, and I always think great optimists, is you meet challenges and instead of saying, shoot, that's something I hadn't thought of, this isn't going to work, you turn those into opportunities. And something that really struck me was you found that in a lot of these countries, there were no children's books in their language. And so there you'd say, well, shoot, they're going to have to read Dr. Seuss in English, but that doesn't work. So you actually, as I understand it, you found authors and illustrators and started publishing books in country in native languages so that people could learn to read their own language, then maybe someday learn English. But it's an amazing part of your success.
Yes, we believed very much in, our founding team came from the private sector, and we believed very much in going out and collecting data. Don't assume you're doing good. Go ask the customers, how are we doing? And so my co-founder, Aaron, spearheaded an early project to go work with the communities in Nepal and Vietnam to ask questions. What are we doing well? What are we doing badly? What are we not doing you wish we were doing? And the number one request that came back was we need more books in Nepalese. We need more children's books in Vietnamese. We want, and that's kind of a no-brainer. Of course, every parent wants their kid to have books in the language they speak at home. The problem was the for-profit publishers don't publish books in languages spoken by poor people. Why would you?
No money in it.
You can't monetize that. So the Khmer Rouge burned whatever books there were in Cambodia. Nobody was publishing or at scale in the Khmer language. And so we said, let's go find the Dr. Seuss of Nepal. Let's find the J.K. Rowling of Vietnam. Let's find the Tintin of Tanzania. And rather than taking Pippi Longstocking or Heidi and convert and translating it into Khmer, let's find local authors and local artists and work with them to publish original children's literature. Over 1,700 original titles have been published, room to read, and I'm very proud of the team. I was present at the creation, but I didn't do the hard work on this. But the program was given the UNESCO World Heritage Prize, the UNESCO Confucius Award for literature. The program was awarded the Library of Congress prize that David Rubenstein funded. So it's super exciting to see it take off. Again, I guess my advice for people would be sometimes things have to start small. I would remind people that our local language publishing effort started with 10 titles in Nepal, just 10. And then our team in Vietnam said, well, this is cool, we're going to do it. And so the baton was passed. And then the Cambodian team decided to do it. And that's how we just got bigger and bigger. But everything started small. The first room to read libraries, there were like 6 of them or 8 of them or 10 of them. So you have to start, then you have to recruit people, then you have to motivate them, not motivate them, recruit motivated people.
Sure.
Give them the direction and then scale the hell out of it.
Yep. And starting that small, were there times where you went to bed at night and you thought, what am I doing? This is so hard.
It wasn't limited to bedtime. It happened at many hours of the day.
Yeah. And so what was it? Is it something innate in you? Was it, like you said, this meaning that you had found? What was it that kept you driving and charging and doing this work as well as you did?
I think for me, like I could come out of, the most frustrating meetings were meeting with potential funders who basically were taking the meeting, but were clearly not going to give anything. And they were happy to give free advice. But they were, it was just a lot of time wasted.
Yeah.
But I reminded myself, yeah, dude, like your life sucks right now, but compared to a village in Cambodia that's rebuilding after the Khmer Rouge genocide, compared to a community in Laos that hasn't even been able to clear all its landmines yet,
right?
Compared to a community in Bangladesh or Pakistan where people are throwing acid in the face of young girls who dare to go to school. My problems are not really that big, so I need to stop whining.
Yep.
I need to put on my big boy pants and get back out there and make shit happen.
Yep.
Because these kids don't need, if I'm just one more guy making excuses, then I'm just one more guy who's let these kids down. And I think it was fortunate in the sense that we're working with kids because it's like every day matters, every day counts. If you say to a community, well, we'll come back in 3 years, that mother's going to say, but my 6-year-old will be 9 years old in 3 years. What do you mean you're not coming back for 3 years?
Right.
So there was, for me, that certain sense of urgency because it involved little people. And it involved this beautiful, malleable thing called their little brain. And we had to get to as many kids as possible, as quickly as possible, with high quality. But to me, of course, the quality is built in. You have to design your projects well enough. And then you basically have to figure out how do you get the money that you can say, yes, yes, yes. It used to kill me when our country directors would say, well, yeah, we're excited. We're going to open 50 libraries this year, but there's demand for 300 villages want us.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, how do we say, I have that now at YouGo with scholarships. In the Philippines last year, we announced our first 100 scholarships for promising young Filipino women to go to university. We had 4,000 applications. I looked at that and said, our acceptance rate is lower than MIT or Harvard's or Stanford's right now. We can't have a high rejection rate. We have to have a high acceptance rate. And I find it ironic. I think it's actually ironic and rather pathetic that universities brag about their low acceptance rate, because all it means is like, wow, congratulations, you're turning lots of people away. And so our view at YouGo is to be super inclusive and like, let's not pride ourselves in rejecting candidates. Let's pride ourselves in how many young women can we bring into the system.
Right.
And I'm optimistic that we can. If we don't have 100,000 women in the program by our 20-year anniversary, I will consider myself to have been a failure as a leader.
Amazing. And I would think too, when you talked about working with these young kids and realizing that your worst days are better than their best, probably.
Yeah.
I think there's something about young people in those situations too. It reminds me, I've heard Warren Buffett say it. I don't know if he came up with it, but winning the ovarian lottery. If you're born in this country, in the United States, you have a leg up. If you're born to parents with an education, you have a leg up. And here are these young kids who did not win the ovarian lottery. None of this is their fault that they're where they are. And it seems to me that can be an inspiration too, where you're working with these people. Like you said, they're malleable and they just happen to be born in this tough situation.
Yeah, very definitely. And then I think for me also what happened is I met so many people along the journey who had traveled themselves to these countries. They had traveled through Nepal, through South Africa, through Tanzania, through Vietnam, and had seen the poverty. and wanted to do something about it. But what do? What you throw your spare change in the jar at the airport on your way out the country, or you give money to a beggar. What we offered at Room to Read, and now also with YouGo, is to say we have a scalable solution where we can literally lift a generation out of poverty. At YouGo, for example, right now, Bill, I can tell you that we now have 2,400 young women in university. 1,000 of them will have graduated within 3 years. 1,400 of them will have graduated in 4 years and be in careers as doctors, nurses, teachers, veterinarians, economists, bankers, agronomists, you name it. We literally can say within 3 to 4 years, you will see a result of a young woman who's graduated from university. And that, I think, motivates a lot of people to realize this is not theoretical, it's real. And this is not, we're going to change the world over a 20 or 30 year time frame. It's, we're going to create real change in the next couple of years. Every single young woman we can get into university, she can graduate within 3 or 4 years.
The success of Room to Read is due in no small part to John Wood's insistence that involving recipients of the organization's philanthropy is key to sustaining success. And as we've seen with so many optimists featured on Blue Sky, John is quick to turn challenges into opportunities. When he found out that there weren't any children's books in the native languages of the kids he was serving, he decided this was an opportunity to find local writers to create some. And everything he did started small, but was motivated by urgency and a desire to make quick impact and reach children immediately, not until after they'd grown to become adults. I next wanted John to speak about his newest venture, YouGo. Let's talk about this transition to YouGo. And I wondered, the chronology and the time period that you've been working on this, it's almost like the kids you started serving when you started this work are no longer little kids anymore, and they're getting to be college age roughly.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if that's part of how, so to explain to everybody, Room to Read is what you described, building these libraries, providing books for young kids. Now you've started something called YouGo. And can you describe what that's all about? And as you do, also explain the emphasis on girls and young women and why that's an important part of what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. Well, in the same way that once upon a time, the communities in Nepal and Vietnam told the Room to Read founding team, we need books in the mother tongue, and we listened. As I visited villages 2008 onward, the young people, as you say, Bill, were growing up. They were getting to be 15, 16, 17 years old. And I was often approached by a mother, a father, a grandmother, holding the hand of a nervous 16, 17, 18-year-old. And they would say, Mr. Wood, thank you for helping our village. My daughter's not done yet. She wants to go to university. She wants to be a doctor, a teacher, a nurse. And can you help her? And I would have to explain to them that Room to Read could not be all things to all people. And we had to stick to our core competencies, et cetera. I probably sounded like a McKinsey consultant as I explained that. Mm-hmm. And I would watch the eyes of the girl meet the eyes of the guardian. Mm-hmm. And they would look crestfallen. They'd look at the ground. And I would just feel a pit in my stomach, Bill. Mm-hmm. I'd be like, who am I to tell this young woman she's not going to be able to go to university? And so I would give them my business card and say, Room to Read doesn't do this, but guess what? John and Amy do this. My wife and I do this. And so my wife and I started funding a small cohort to study Nepal, India, Cambodia, Vietnam. And what we discovered were several things. Number one was that there was a cohort of young women who had gotten to be the point where they were ready for university but couldn't afford it. Yeah. That the acceptance rates for women, especially girls from poor families, were way below those of boys. So we've reversed that gap quite a bit in the more advanced economies. But in the developing world, there's still a big gap where if you're a rich boy, you're more likely to go to university than you are if you're a young woman from a poor family. But the average cost, because we were raising money in strong currencies like the US dollar, we had some friends in Hong Kong and the UK and Singapore put money in. We found out the average cost was about $700 per scholar per year to help a young one get through university. And that to me just felt like a giant no-brainer. Yeah. Like if I can, so what, I'll make a couple sacrifices, I'll spend a little less money myself this year, and some more young women can go to university. And that was really just how, for me, the idea of YouGo started. But then I realized this is random. It's reactionary. It's not strategic. It's not well thought out. Should there be an NGO? Should there be a charity that does one thing and one thing only? And that would be helping this generation of young women go to university. That was the genesis in my head of Yugo. And honestly, I was thinking about it for years and years and years and years and years. And I finally got to the point where I said, gosh, once upon a time, I made the decision to leave Microsoft to start Room to Read. I might have to make a similar decision now, leave hopefully on a high note, but go start, I think, a symbiotic organization. Yeah. It's not competitive with Room to Read. It's basically the logical next step. And not just with Room to Read, but we have dozens of NGOs around the world that are either working with us or in line to work with us to say, hey, don't forget us. We have a lot of young women in our program too who want to go to university.
So can you, so people can picture, can you spell and describe how you came up with the name Yugo?
Yeah, I wish this was audio so I could show the logo. Yeah. Maybe you can put it in the, put up the podcast. Maybe you can show the logo, but it's a capital U-G-O. So it's a promise. It's a double entendre. It's a promise we make to the young women. You will go to university. The U has a jaunty little graduation cap hanging off of it. So we make it clear what we're all about. And we stole the green from Dartmouth. So apologies to any Dartmouth alum, but we used the Dartmouth green. And so that's Yugo, U-G-O. That's the promise we make to every young woman who comes into the program.
And in these countries where you're helping these girls and young women, is it a cultural thing? Is there still a question about whether or not women should in those countries should be attending school just culturally? Is that part of what you're up against, or is it just you're finding women from poorer families, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, there's quite a few force fields that keep young women out of school. One is I have a lot of young women who told me their stories to say, everyone in my village laughed at me when I told them I wanted to go to university. They said, oh, you're poor. Oh, you're from an ethnic minority. Oh, your parents are not educated. And these are like her fellow citizens laughing at her, telling her she's not going to be able to go. So there's some of that. There's some of these entrenched attitudes that boys, higher education should be for boys, or that girls can't be a doctor, boys should be a doctor. But the reality is it's not that difficult to smash through those barriers. They exist. I don't like the fact that they exist, but I know that we're smart enough and we're hardworking enough to be able to overcome those barriers. And when I look at the biggest issue we have right now, it's that for every scholarship we can offer, we have 5 or 10 applications from qualified young women. So what we have to do now is we have to solve the capital issue and make sure we have enough capital. And it's important to us too, Bill, because when we offer the scholarships to our Yugo scholars, we tell them we're with you through the day of graduation. This is not a one-off 1 year, and then we have to pray that fundraising goes well next year. Every time we put a young woman in the program, we either have an investor who's written a 4-year grant agreement for a cohort of them, or we put the money aside in a lockbox, to quote Al Gore. We have our lockbox, and we lockbox that money away for years 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, so that every young woman is guaranteed. These young women live lives of consistent inconsistency. What we're saying to them is, we can give you consistency here. You perform academically, the scholarship renews. Full stop. I don't need to use any more words than that.
And that seems to be a key, because I've seen programs here in the United States where all the focus is to get that student to college, and then they get there and they're lacking transportation, or they hadn't budgeted for books, and then they're dropping out after the first semester, and it's almost worse than if they'd never gone in some ways. And it seems to me you've thought that through.
There's also a safety net aspect for us that not every scholarship we do is a new scholarship to go year one. We found in the Philippines, for example, through our partner, the Ayala Foundation, we found that there was a large number of young women dropping out in year 2 or 3 because their family incomes have been really negatively impacted by the pandemic. So that becomes even easier in a certain sense, that if you're talking about a young woman who's finished 2 years of university, then you're only $800 times $2 away from getting her through the finish line and getting her to graduate. So we literally have this nice assemblage now where it's a lot of new first-year students, but it's also a lot of students in year 2, 3. We have a really exciting program now in Vietnam. I call it the medical vertical. The Vietnamese government has placed a high priority on improving their public health system. So they need more doctors, nurses, lab techs, pharmacists, et cetera. Our incoming class of scholars with our partner, the Relay Fund in Vietnam this year, 41% are on the medical track. And that to me is magical, because when that young woman becomes a doctor, nurse, et cetera, she's going to not just help her family and her, eventually when she has kids, she's going to be an asset to the community. I have a 3-year-old son. I know when he's been sick, I will do anything to get him to the best pediatrician possible. I want the whatever meds they prescribe for him, whatever cough syrup, I'll do anything to help that little guy. I think to myself, what would it be like if I was living in the Mekong Delta and my son was sick and he couldn't get to a doctor? One of the leading causes of death for children is pneumonia. Pneumonia should not be a killer. We know how to treat it. So one of the things that motivates me, especially as a parent, is like, wow, I want to make sure that there's no mother or father or grandparent, whoever's in that situation where they can't find a qualified place to get themselves treated, to get their child treated. So I think medical will end up being a really big part of the Yugo story. I can't say that yet because we're only 18 months old, and I've always said, stay humble, stay hungry. But I'd like to really blow that out in the coming years and have have literally thousands or tens of thousands of young people training themselves up in medicine to help their societies.
Amazing. And you mentioned it earlier that, some people, these women get looked at as like, well, you're from a poor family, so you're not going to go to college. And one of the things someone explained to me a while back is that not every country is like the United States, where we believe in trying to do upward mobility is a thing. I mean, there are countries where it's literally a caste, where you're born into this and that's where you're going to be. So it seems like that's another, I would think in some countries, that's a cultural barrier that you're up against that you have to knock down to make this happen. Is that fair?
No, it's a barrier, but it's also an opportunity. So in Vietnam, as an example, about 10% of the incoming class of Yugo scholars are from ethnic minorities. Our partners have gone out to the really remote provinces in the mountainous north, mountainous west of Vietnam. And in a certain sense, it's an advantage, because when that team shows up in that village and says, we're looking for ambitious and promising young women, whoa, that gets around really quickly. Yeah. People start talking about that.
Yeah.
And if you're the only person I've ever seen from outside of a community saying, we believe in your girls, I think that turns very quickly from an obstacle into an opportunity.
Fascinating. And something else you've said about the benefits of focusing on women with your work that really struck me is that, and I want to get this right, is that when they do have work and they do have an income, they spend that money in more effective ways back towards their families and their kids and their well-being, as opposed to guys who presumably blow it on more frivolous things. There's a serious flywheel effect when you give women these opportunities and income. And is that part of your thesis?
Yes, there's been a lot of studies on this. You can look up Kathy Matsui at Goldman Sachs in Japan has done some really pioneering work on this, not only at Goldman, but also at Asian University for Women. The studies I've read said that when a young woman makes a marginal dollar, she spends 90% of it on family: food, clothing, shelter, medicine, education. Men are not quite as enlightened on how we spend our money. I used to joke that you could go to Lang Kwai Fong in Hong Kong on a Friday night and see how men spend their money. So all things held equal. And I've seen this with the own examples. The earliest scholars Amy and I funded, we've sat down and had long dinners with them in Cambodia and Nepal, and they'll tell us stories proudly. I put my younger sister through university. I put my younger brother through motorcycle mechanic school. I built a new home for my parents so they have a concrete floor for the first time in their life. It's incredible when these young women begin earning money. Their first instinct is, how can this money help people in my family and in my inner circle, as opposed to how can I spend that on myself?
Just as when the gentleman in Nepal encouraged him to come back with some books, John Wood responded when parents told him that their children who experienced the benefits of room to read were not yet done with their education. Yugo was a natural extension of Room to Read, and John Wood wasted no time in starting it up. Imagine John's satisfaction when he provides these opportunities to girls who were laughed at when they told people they wanted to go to university. And these scholarships were not open-ended. The students had to perform academically to add more years. And it's easy to see that this work will have significant lasting effects. Training one young woman to be a doctor who will treat hundreds or thousands of patients while simultaneously serving as a role model for younger girls considering a career is an incredibly impactful investment. Now back to our final segment of my Blue Sky conversation with John Wood.
What we've done at Yugo is we constructed a model from the ground up that assures zero leakage.
Yeah.
And 100% of the money that anybody who's not on the board donates goes to the scholarship program. So what I mean by that is, number one, I work for no salary.
Yep.
My wife, Amy, who's chief of marketing, works for no salary. Our treasurer / CFO, we all have day jobs that and we've all made enough money in our lives. We're comfortable. So we can work for free.
Yep.
The global board of Yugo then covers every dollar of administrative expenses and fundraising expenses. So if somebody comes to me and says, I'm going to give you $800, I'm just great. 100% of that money, every single penny of that is going to go to the scholarship program. So again, I joke about how much buzz there is around effective altruism. I'm like, this is a poster child. I don't know the strict dictionary definition of effective altruism, but I know that for every Sam Bankman-Fried out there blathering on about it, you need to have people on the ground getting actual stuff done today, tomorrow, the next day.
Right.
And to me, this is $800 to get a young woman through a year of university, $3,200 to get her through 4 years. That is altruistic, and I think it's pretty effective.
Yep. Well, so I can hear in the way you describe your work and some of the creative ways you've created opportunities for people to give you money, your organization money. That's one of the things that keeps people away from the nonprofit world. A lot of people are kind of allergic to fundraising and asking for money. And I heard you say you love it, and for reasons that I really respect. Can you describe why you don't hate fundraising?
Yeah, I view fundraising as being, I'm a conduit through which good things can happen. So I'm not asking for people to give me money because I'm taking a $250,000 a year salary. I'm asking people to give me money because I want to fly first class on Emirates, to a United Nations conference where I spend 3 days blathering on about whatever. I literally am like, I can say to people, I'm in it to win it. I'm working for free. Amy, my wife, who's our chief marketing officer, we're working for no salary. The board's covering overhead. So what we're saying is we can get so much done so effectively at such a low cost. And I guess that's why I'm optimistic that we can really scale this, because we don't need $1 gazillion.
So people listening to this, if they're motivated by what you're talking about, you said you don't need $1 gazillion. Obviously, you wouldn't mind people contributing. Are there people? Could you use more people on the ground, Americans who would go over there? Or is it mostly in country where you're hiring? Or how else could people who are motivated by your story help?
Well, people could throw house parties. They could get their book club involved, their church, their mosque, their synagogue, get their company involved. People can go to our website, which is ugouniversity.org. So ugouniversity.org. They can find me on LinkedIn. We're building out an incredible global team. Every day I wake up, I have dozens of WhatsApp messages and emails from people around the world, whether it be Switzerland or the UK or Hong Kong or Singapore or Sydney, who are doing fundraising events for us. We're helping to grow our, kind of build the brand in each market. So I would say if people want to get involved, it's definitely not, we're going to put you in a plane and send you to Vietnam and have you tell the local people what to do. That's not our model.
Right.
But we definitely are looking for people to get involved. And ideally, if they find a way to help us to bring more donors in and more capital. And that's not for everybody, but let's face it, that's what we need. We basically, I don't want to turn down thousands of young women who want to get to university. I want to be able to have enough funding that we can say yes to as many young women as possible.
And a similar question, but for a different audience. If there's someone in their mid-30s like you were, when you were still at Microsoft, who has made some means and is maybe trying to get out of the range of the voice of their boss like you were, who is thinking about a life change like this, as you look back on it, it doesn't sound to me like you have any regrets, or you sit back and wonder, gee, if I'd stayed at Microsoft. What advice would you have for someone at that point in their lives about making a leap like the one you made?
I guess my first piece of advice would be, you have to own the decision. It's not a democracy. Go talk to people, get advice, but ultimately there has to be one ruler and one dictator of what you do. I think a lot of people will go out and get advice, and they'll let people talk them out of their dreams. Someone's going to tell you, oh, it's going to be financially difficult. Somebody's going to go, wow, but what if what if you have children? So I think own the decision. And then I think part of it is trying to determine whether or not, do you need to go start something new, or should you just go find an existing organization doing good work and go work for that group, right? So I oftentimes I would speak at universities, and people would say, I'm going to go start an NGO in Haiti. And I would say, you don't need it. Like, Haiti has the most NGOs per capita of any country in the Western Hemisphere.
Right.
Yet they still have all these endemic problems because they just don't have enough. They don't have too few NGOs. They have too few NGOs that have scaled with impact. So I guess one piece of advice from me would be, don't think you have to go start something brand new. You could potentially join an organization that already exists. And that's what's happening for me now at YouGo. I have over 100 volunteers around the world who are each running different aspects. Kirsten Sansom, who used to run our Singapore gala every year, she moved to New York, texted me, she's like, what do you got for me? I said, can you be our senior vice president of storytelling? Can you use your skills to help us bring these stories from the field and make them alive? I had a young man I used to mentor talking this morning. He works at TikTok. He's like, look, I'm going to help you figure out a way to get YouGo on TikTok so I think there's room for everyone to get involved. I want YouGo in the same way that Room to Read was a global movement. I want to make YouGo a global movement. And so my mantra has always been recruit, delegate, repeat, recruit, delegate, repeat. I'm recruiting.
And you're about 2 decades on in this work. And to wrap things up, to talk about the concept of optimism, as you started this work, you had a certain vision of what kind of a difference you might be able to make and a sense of optimism about it. Now that you're 2 decades into it, do you feel more or less optimistic about the upside of this kind of work and what we can do around the world to help people in the kind of situations of the people you're helping?
Oh, definitely more optimistic. You can't do this work unless you're an optimist. The pessimists, the Eeyores, will lie in bed and tell themselves all the reasons they can't do it or it won't work. But you can't do this work unless you're an optimist. I know you've interviewed our mutual friend Anita Nowak from McGill. Her book on emphatic action, which I highly recommend, is a great book talking about it's not about having empathy. It's about having empathy and then taking action to turn that potential energy into kinetic energy, to mix my metaphors here. But no, I'm an optimist. Like I feel, Bill, like every time I turn around, I have somebody in my life saying, this is awesome what you're doing at YouGo. I want to help. How can I get involved? So I have friends hosting an event in Chicago in 2 weeks' time. I have friends here in San Diego hosting events. We have friends doing events in Hong Kong and Sydney in November. And those are all just people who they're self-motivated, they're self-organized. Nobody's making any money off this, but people have that feeling of having meaning in their lives. And I think we're all in a situation now where we're going to live, God willing, really long lives. So this whole idea, like, you retire, you spend 5 years in the golf course, you die, is history. Now it's like people make a decent amount of money. They're comfortable by age 50. They probably have 40 years left. Man, you better have a purpose. You better have a reason to get out of bed in the morning and stay motivated. If you don't have that, your spouse is probably going to be like, why are you hanging around the house? Can you go find something meaningful, something useful to go do? And anybody who wants to do that, check out our website, yougo.university. There's contact details there. And I'm recruiting.
Amazing.
Unabashedly recruiting.
Well, I can, just a short conversation, I can see why you've been so successful with this work, and I can see why people are throwing parties to raise money for you, because your track record now has demonstrated that you're a bet worth making. And I'm really, really blown away by what you've done and your story and the way you tell it. And I know you're very busy, so I really appreciate you spending this time with me today. It's been a true pleasure.
Well, thank you, Bill. And thank you for doing what you do. Because if you're the one who's going to create those waves that bring more people in and hopefully get more people involved with groups like YouGo and Room to Read. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. Take care. In giving advice to aspiring social entrepreneurs, John Wood echoes something that Blue Sky alum Teresa Shaheen said. Don't feel like you have to start something from scratch. You may, of course, but there are so many organizations already out there who can use support that you should probably start there before trying to reinvent a perfectly good wheel. And John's work is hard, so as he says, you better have a purpose to keep you going. John Wood is all about purpose, and his optimistic attitude is infectious and clearly a driver of his remarkable success. I hope you enjoyed this Blue Sky conversation with John Wood. And I make this request at the end of every episode because it's helpful to our cause and will give us feedback to make this show better. Please consider subscribing to Blue Sky and giving us a rating and review. And while you're at it, follow the Optimism Institute on social media. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke, and I thank you for listening.